Welcome back to Friar Talk. Today, we are going to be talking about the Fernando Tatis injury, unfortunately, and really just going through the ramifications of what this means for the Padres now, what it means for their offseason, and really just the effects that it has overall on the team. Obviously, this is a very, very, very bad thing that can happen for the Padres. Fernando is expected to miss 3+ months. Kevin Acee came out, had a report that he could potentially not be back until August, which is well into the season. There's been some other reports that he's probably going to miss 60 games. So, kind of varying like 60 to like 90, 60 to 100 games. Just kind of depends, right? So it's not 100% sure how many games he's going to miss at this point. It's also not 100% sure that he's going to get surgery on his wrist, but it is extremely likely, I would say. And in this episode, we're not really going to be talking about the Padres organization and like some of like the dysfunctionality within it. However, we are going to do a full episode on that later this week. We're going to have Chase on for that one, probably Wednesday or Thursday, I would guess, when we post it. But there's a lot of things to go over with some of the issues that the Padres have had with their injury history, with some of their players. This whole situation, we've had Brian Dozier came on and talked about the Padres organization. So there's a lot of stuff to get into of just like how it's being ran. And there's a lot of serious question marks and a lot of concerns that we have. So we want to do a full segment on that later this week. Not really going to get into that today. But the main things I want to talk about today are, one, what does it do for the offseason? Two, what does it do for the regular season? How does the Padres outlook look now that Tatis? I'm gonna say he's gonna miss around 60 to 80 games. That's what I'm just gonna put out there. That's not a guarantee. It could be more, could be less, but I feel like that's the most like realistic. And then we're gonna also talk about like who's gonna replace him, and we'll get into that last. But first thing, off season, I think what this does is this puts a lot less pressure, however you want to say it, of trying to build a winning team this year. And I know that sucks, but when you look at the Padres situation, to me at least, it doesn't make much sense to trade Eric Hosmer or Will Myers right now. And I get that they're pretty tight on cash. If they sign Seiya Suzuki, they're not going to really have much left. But it doesn't make much sense now to go and try to move Hosmer when you might be missing Fernando for half the year. That just does not make sense. It doesn't make sense to trade Will Myers, who has $20 million left on basically a 1-year contract at this point, to go sign someone else to try to make a run, and then you don't have Fernando for half the season. This doesn't mean they're selling out on the season, but it means there's not as much of a reason to go all in, which you can look at it as this sucks, we're not going to be as good. But you can also look at it as, okay, maybe we're not going to blow assets to try to win it all in 1 year. So I think there's two ways to look at it. I actually think that it might be smart long term. Say they were going to sign or trade Will Myers, I think that could have came back to bite them, just because I don't think it's smart to move Will Myers when he has 1 year left on his deal. Also, you look at Eric Hosmer. Eric Hosmer's contract drops down from $21 million this year to 13 next year. So his contract's also going to be a lot less, a lot easier to trade later on. So I think it makes Eric Hosmer easier to trade. And also, you're not going to have Will Myers on the books moving forward after this season. So I think their offseason is going to be a lot more passive than I initially thought it was going to be. I thought they might try to make a couple aggressive moves. I do not see that happening. Isaac, do you think they're going to make any aggressive moves, or how do you think this kind of changes what the offseason should look like?
We've been talking about how the Padres need power bats, how we need guys who can slug, hit some bombs. They just lost their best guy in terms of, someone that could. It's really not only the best guy in terms of power hitting, but really we all know it's our best player, unfortunately. And I feel like how many people are actually going to cut us slack considering the Braves just won it without Ronald Acuna. I don't know. This does change course a little bit. Matt brought up how he doesn't think it's a good idea to trade Will Myers, Eric Hosmer. It doesn't make much sense unless you're able to fleece somebody. You have to fleece somebody, because how are you going to be able to afford to give up somebody like, any of your top prospects right now? Yeah, I don't think you can afford to. You're just kind of damaging the future in that aspect, considering, who knows when Fernando comes back. Personally, I'm going to take the under 80 games. I think he's going to play, around 90 to 100 games, just because we've known Fernando has been able to heal from his past injuries very, very fast, faster than normal. But This is a different injury. It's the past ones have been shoulder subluxations. Those are just, the shoulder pops out. This is a broken bone. And it needs to be stated how difficult it is to come back from something like a wrist injury that was broken, or even like anything like an elbow. It's very, very, very difficult. And I think he's going to struggle. I think he's going to struggle at the beginning. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. That is my favorite player. But I'm just trying to be realistic. Regarding Eric Hosmer and Will Myers, I don't know if you guys saw that, for everyone watching, it took trading an all-star to get a $35 million contract off the books for the Reds. And that was only $35 million. I don't know how many contracts how do you say, Eugenio Suarez had on his deal. I don't know how many years he had left, but to give up that much is a lot. That is quite, after Castellanos, that was probably your best player last year. So very difficult. I'd imagine it'd be very difficult for the Padres to get rid of either one right now. Preferably, we want to get rid of Eric Hosmer, sorry, because next year we're not going to be able to trade him. Will Myers, I don't know. I'm kind of torn right now because I understand that he only has 1 year left on his deal, and it's like, oh, you can afford to bite on that 1 year, especially because you're going to need another outfielder if you do get rid of him. At the same time, I'm kind of thinking if you do get rid of him, it frees up some money on the books to go get somebody else that will hit for a lot of power. So torn on that decision right now. It seems right now, though, that both of those guys are holding back the Padres from making moves. I mean, I'm not going to say that for sure, but it's just that those guys they have big contracts and that money could be allocated elsewhere, but they're still on the team, so it can't. And since it's so difficult to move those guys, we could possibly see the Padres wait. We haven't even signed Nick Martinez yet. So I think that kind of shows we are in a very difficult spot because of those two contracts. But, regarding Tatis, next man up, man. I'm honestly very surprised I'm not as sad as I thought as I kind of expected, because you got to remember Bob Melvin comes from an organization that didn't really give him much to play with in the first place. I still think this team is better than what he's been provided with Oakland. And this isn't saying Fernando's not even out for the whole year. Like, if we're even in it come time Fernando comes back, I will be ecstatic and I'll be very happy with those results. It's always going to be next man up, though. CJ Abrams, Ha-seong Kim, both of them got to step up. It's possible that we see CJ Abrams slide into short, and it's also possible we see Jake Cronenworth slide into short and Ha-seong Kim playing second. We could also see Ha-seong Kim slide into short. There's a bunch of different possibilities, which I think if you're going to go upside, you got to plug in CJ Abrams. You're not going to get much upside out of somebody who, had a 662 OPS. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but in terms of at the plate, it's just not something you want to see. And he was a 2-WAR player even without, much plate production. So of course he can be fantastic if he's able to hit at the plate, but he still needs time to adjust. Let's see how he does in spring training. I think it's going to be a competition between Ha-seong Kim and CJ Abrams. I really do. I think it's going to be a spring training competition. Whoever wins is going to get one of the starting spots. I think if CJ wins, he's going to play shortstop. I think if Ha-seong Kim wins, he's going to play second base. And Jake's going to slide over to shortstop. So, next man up. We ride no matter what. I still think this team is geared up for at least being able to compete until Fernando comes back. This rotation is solid. If Mackenzie Gore is able to come up, in May and be solid, I think that's going to provide a huge boost to this team. Getting guys who come in mid season, especially guys that are your top prospects, are huge. They provide huge boosts. Morally, in terms of everything in the organization, among the players, huge boost, and among us fans. But regards to Fernando, it's sad to see. Of course, we all are going to wish him the best, and hopefully he's able to have a speedy recovery, because this Padres team is not as fun to watch without him. So hopefully we get good news come May and June.
Yeah, so quick question for you before I get into it, but what would your goal be for the Padres season this year?
Compete. I just think they got to compete. I think, you want to get to the National League Division Series. That's where you want to end up, because quite frankly, like, we're tired of losing. San Diego's tired. AJ Preller's tired of losing. Like, I think all the moves that have been compiled throughout AJ Preller's time, especially from 2020 on, show he is tired of losing. He knows that we as fans are tired of losing. We're tired of being basically Los Angeles's little brother. I mean, that's what we've been for a really, really long time. Just a second fiddle, somebody that doesn't even get thought of in the NL West. So I don't know, man. I feel like you still gotta go out there and try and compete. You still gotta go out there and try and make some moves. You need to get power bats. There's still power bats available in the market, and I understand you're kind of trapped, but sorry, I don't really think it means that you're stuck. I don't think it means you give up on the season. I see too many people thinking that we should give up on the season and we should start getting towards 2023. That's not entirely the case. You still got a rotation of, Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell, Mike Clevenger, Yu Darvish, Mackenzie Gore is only the first look, but he's looking all right now. So there's a lot of things flowing right now for the Padres that although it's one setback, it's of course a major setback, there's still a lot of potential for this team to be solid.
Yeah, for me, I feel like the expectation should still be the playoffs, because we look at what the format is. 7 teams make the playoffs. 7 out of 15 teams make the playoffs. You're telling me that you can't make it in those 7, you can't be one of those 7 teams when your first 4 in your rotation are Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell, Mike Clevenger, Yu Darvish? You should be able to figure it out. Not to mention, at the 5 spot, you have 3 guys competing for that spot if you do indeed sign Nick Martinez, which I believe he's just pending a physical. That's what I've seen. But I know it's not official. I know he's not officially on the roster for whatever reason. But say we do have him. Like, those are 3 guys competing for that 5th spot, and then you have another guy. Like, you have 2 guys that can basically be long relievers. Likely one of them is in AAA. That's a really good rotation. I get that the rotation was the issue last year, but I also think we have to look at it and go, this is a different rotation. This is not the same group of guys. Yu Darvish was not the same pitcher at the end of the year than what he's going to start at the beginning of this year, at least what has been the pattern of his career. We didn't have Mike Clevenger. Guys, Mike Clevenger is an elite arm. Mike Clevenger has, throughout all of his time in the MLB, is pretty consistently just a 3 ERA starting pitcher that eats up a ton of innings. So if he's back, like, that's the thing. Like, that's a really good starting rotation. There are question marks. I get that, but I still think that the expectation should be the playoffs. And I think the other thing that's cool about, we talked about what is, changing up the playoff structure to the MLB. One of the things we said was like, okay, the question mark is, does it hurt the regular season? Does it make the regular season less valuable? We're like, maybe, but also it makes the playoffs that much better because normally, and I'll go to the AL in this one, normally Mike Trout isn't in the playoffs. It's a lot more likely that he's going to be in the playoffs. It's for reasons like these, when Fernando's going to miss the first couple months of the season, and they want the Padres to be in the playoff mix. They want to see Fernando in the playoffs as a MLB fan base. So I think that's kind of why this was put in place, and I think this is an example of, like, because if this is a regular season, like a normal season, past season, and Fernando's out for 60 to 80 games, I think it looks way different because you have way less playoff spots. And getting to a wild card means so much less because it's a 1-game wild card, right? So I think it changes a lot. I still think the expectations should be the playoffs. In terms of next man up, I think you're exactly right, Isaac. I think it's going to come down to Ha-seong Kim versus CJ Abrams in camp, who's going to be the best guy there. If Hosmer did get traded, I don't think he will. I don't really know if it's the best move for the Padres. I don't know if it's the best move for them to make right now. A lot of the reason why is, like, Isaac, you brought up, Jesse Winker was moved to get a bad contract off. Jesse Winker was an all-star. Like, they're not going to move an all-star to move Hosmer's contract. We've talked about moving Campy in the past. It's going to be Campy probably plus a lot to move Eric Hosmer, and probably not even all of his deal. So I think it makes more sense if you're going to move Hosmer to move him next year. Maybe you build up some value in Hosmer. I don't have a lot of faith in that, I'll be honest, but maybe you build up some value in him, and either way, his contract's less next year. You're freeing up $27 million between Eric Hosmer and Will Myers next year. There are good free agents on the market next season. That is when, if you're going to make a splash, that is a more realistic way, like a realistic time to make that splash. So for this season, it's going to be a similar team than it was in 2021 and also 2020. Like, that's the thing. So This was a team that was 15 games over 500, 110 games into the season last year. That's good. If you're there this year, like you should make the playoffs. It took the most ridiculous, like falling apart collapse that we've seen. The other thing that I think a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are really frustrated, and I get it. Like I'm frustrated with the whole Fernando situation. I'm very frustrated, and we will get our gripes out at later this week about that. But I think that the outlook isn't like, oh my God, it's over, like the sky's falling. I don't think it's like that. I really don't, because this is a team that should be able to be one of the top 7 teams in the NL, even with Fernando missing half the year. I truthfully believe that. And if you don't, then you don't meet your expectations. But that's still the expectations for me, and I still think they should be able to do it. One other thing I want to add is I think it's kind of interesting because you bring up next man up. There's a lot of guys on this team that the Padres have been trying to bank on the last couple of years that have not really come through. You look around the team, you go, all right, I would not put ha-seong Kim in that category. I would not put CJ Abrams in that category, even though these are like the guys that are immediately competing for that spot. But all right, can Eric Hosmer provide any value? Can Will Myers be more than an average player making way too much money? Can Trent Grisham take that jump? Can Austin Nola stay healthy? Can the starting rotation actually be a cohesive unit? And if those things happen, then I think you're going to be all right. But they've been what ifs for the last couple of years, and it has not worked out in their favor. So I think it's a lot of pressure on all those guys. And if this team's going to be good, like you're going to need those guys to step up either way. Like that's what I don't know if I was telling you about this, Isaac. I don't think it was, but one of the things I said when I was talking about the Fernando injury with someone was, look, it's going to come down to, can the starting rotation stay healthy? Can the depth that they have in the minor leagues, if someone goes down for a while, can they come up and be okay? That was going to be the issue either way. That doesn't change. What changes is you're losing a lot of offensive production for a large portion of the year. So if the starting rotation can be as dominant as the talent there is, then I think they're going to be all right. If some of these guys can step up and play well, if Austin Nola can have a good season, if Eric Hosmer can be half decent, if ha-seong Kim can make a jump, if CJ Abrams looks not even the guy that we think he is, if he looks like he's on the way to becoming that guy, like this team's going to look a lot better. But it's definitely a massive blunder. I mean, this is the biggest blunder so far of the MLB season for any team, of course. So gotta step up. Final thing for expectations. This coaching staff is night and day from last year's coaching staff and any coaching staff that I've seen with the Padres in my lifetime. So that's also a huge factor when you look at this of, yeah, Jace Tingler was not respected, and Jace Tingler looked like he was completely lost at times. Bob Melvin is not going to look lost. Bob Melvin is going to look like he has complete control of what's going on. He's going to understand, he's going to understand the game's ins and outs. And I think you're going to see that on display every night. So I think that's also another factor that's big in this season. But yeah, this is a crappy day for Padres fans for sure. Anything else you want to add, Isaac, before we take off?
I mean, I'm just trying to think, we still need one or two power bats. There's just a lot of what ifs right now. I've seen things on Twitter saying, what if the Padres get Trevor Story and they move him to second when Fernando's back? That's not happening. What if the Padres get Chris Bryant and they have Manny play shortstop and Chris Bryant play third? How? With what money? Last one was the Padres should sign Carlos Correa to a 1-year, $45 million contract. How? How? Where are they going to get that? It's just, we can't begin to look at outside star resources in order to try and supposedly save our season. We can't do that. We don't have the money for that. Well, that's basically what if AJ Preller had the money for a star, we would have already had one. I guarantee that. I think we would have already traded for one. We would have already signed one. I think that's a guarantee if we had the money, but we don't. So right now it is next man up within the organization. I think, you brought up Will Myers. Will Myers is a big question mark right now, and I think something you brought up before we started recording was, I think Matt brought up, was Will Myers is kind of in the best position to succeed right now in his career. a massive upgrade at manager, massive upgrade in the coaching stuff, in the coaching staff in general. And the universal DH is here. And the parties have discussed, having rotating options at the DH, getting him to DH, not every game because we need him in the outfield because we don't have any. We don't have many outfielders, but getting him to DH to try and keep him healthy is going to be one of the biggest importances, I think, of the Padres season, because this guy makes a lot of money. You need to keep him healthy, and you need to find ways to get him to be productive as he was in 2020, where he probably would have been a 4+4 player if he kept on that pace. Eric Hosmer, there's lost hope. You're not getting any. I really don't think you're getting much out of Eric Hosmer no matter what. But I really think you said it best, man. I still think this team's geared up to compete. I think what it most relies on is how's this pitching staff going to do? This pitching staff, last year's pitching staff was pretty horrible, and we still were 5+ games above in the wild card, ahead in the wild card for a while. And then injuries started happening, and of course that's when we all fell apart. But remember, Blake Snell, up to that point where we were successful, still had a 4+ ERA. Darvish was in the 3s, Musgrove was in the 3s, Paddock was in the 4s. We didn't even have a 5th starter. It was a bullpen day. So really, we were only rocking 2 successful starters up until that point. Now we need to be able to rock 3 or 4+, and we got guys that can do that. It all relies heavily on the pitching staff. I think that's going to be the biggest question mark is, will this pitching staff be able to carry us up until our superstar comes back? And I think they will. But shortstop, who's going to take over? I think it's going to be one of Cronenworth, Abrams, Kim, and I think that's all it's going to be. Manny's going to stay at short, and still think this team's geared up to win, man. I really am still somewhat excited for the season. It's hard to be excited after today, really hard. It's hard to keep your hopes up. I understand that, but as days come, maybe as the season comes, when you start seeing how talented this team actually can be, I think more excitement will start to generate. And as long as they're hanging in there by the time Tatis comes back, then I think we can still hope. It's 6 teams make the playoffs, dude. It's not like we're one of the worst. It's not like we're still a top 6 team in the NL. I really believe that.
Is it 6 or 7? It's 14 games, right?
I thought it was 12.
It was decided between 12 or 14.
Yeah.
Either way.
We're
Either
still
way, you should make
top. Yeah, we're still one of the top 6 rosters in the MLB. So even though this is a massive blow, you have in-house options, and you're just going to have to do is you're going to have to go find some cheap options that are going to provide you some power. And if you don't do that, then you might be setting yourself up for failure. You set yourself up for failure a long time ago with 2 bad contracts, but you're going to need to find a way to make at least one of them work. You're going to need to find a way to get one of them to produce. No better coaching staff to do it, or no better manager to do it, because I think he's been having guys produce that weren't supposed to for a long time in an organization that hasn't provided him with much. But at least one of them has to produce. And I mean, if you're able to ship one off, congratulations, you did the impossible. I'm really rooting for CJ Abrams. We're gonna have a video about CJ, but I'm excited for him, man. It's easy to be sad about Tatis, but when your top prospect is a shortstop, it's a little easier to not be that sad.
Yeah, tomorrow's episode is going to be just a full episode about CJ Abrams, about him kind of, this is going to be a big step for him, at least that we're expecting it to be a big step for him. Even though he hasn't played a ton in the minors, he's been banged up. It's happened with a lot of other players, though, in the past, and a lot of guys that don't have that much minor league experience, but are still able to demonstrate that they have the skill set to play in the MLB. We do think CJ is that kind of guy, so we're going to get into him tomorrow. But final thing I want to say, there's not an organization in the MLB that had a bigger jump from their pitching coach and their manager from last year to this year. Going from Larry Rothschild and Jace Tingler to Bob Melvin and Ruben Niebla is absolutely absurd. So a lot of the issues that we saw last year should not be happening this next season. So I think that's something where you might look at it and go yeah, you guys are talking about all this talent, but last year we underperformed so much. There were so many injuries, and there was so much just horrible coaching decisions that made absolutely no sense that you will not see this time around. Instead, you're going to see the opposite. Instead of seeing your team being pulled down by their coaching staff, just being completely inept, you're going to see these guys potentially improve this year because of their coaching staff. what a concept. But I think that's something that we're going to see. So, Ruben Niebla, we've talked about him so much, and we've also talked about Bob Melvin a good amount, but more about Ruben Niebla. So, you look in this pitching staff, it should be a lot more of like stock ups than, hey, what's going on with Mackenzie Gore? Hey, why is Trent Grisham not got a hit in it feels like 3 months? That kind of stuff is not what should be happening with this coaching staff. So I think it's going to play a big factor as well. But thank you guys all for listening. Pretty long one today. Had a lot to get into. Tomorrow's episode will be CJ Abrams, and we'll keep up with any moves that happen for the Padres. But yeah, so I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Really, really crappy news, but hopefully Fernando gets back soon. If you're 500 when he gets back, you're in a good spot. So hopefully that's the case. We'll see how it all plays out, see if we get any more news, but we'll see what happens in free agency. I think Isaac's definitely right. You add a bat or two. I think it looks a lot better. But there's a lot of guys that this team has been kind of banking on to perform well. And so a lot of guys are just gonna have to step up, and that's really just how it's gonna have to be. But yeah, thank you guys all for listening, and we'll be back talking Padres baseball tomorrow.